So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for this alumni session and webinar. We're really glad you could be here today. Today's session is part of our ongoing efforts to connect our alumni community through shared experience, insights, and conversations. And we're especially pleased today to be welcoming two alumni who will be sharing insights from their own experiences with us shortly. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we're on. Laurentian University is located on the traditional lands of the Atikokan, Anishinaabeg, and Wahnapitae First Nation within the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory. We recognize and respect the enduring relationship that Indigenous people have with this land, and we are grateful for the opportunity to gather here today. It is now my pleasure to hand things over to Giselle Roberts, who will be introducing our alumni speakers today. Giselle is the Director of Research and Innovation at Laurentian University and brings more than 15 years of experience in innovation, research administration, and technology transfer. She works closely with the partners across campus and in the broader community to support research, commercialization, and collaboration, and she plays an active role in strengthening the Sudbury innovation ecosystem. We are grateful to have her with us today to introduce our alumni speakers.
Thanks, Shanley. Good afternoon, everyone. And yes, my name is Giselle Roberts. I'm the Director of Research and Innovation here at Laurentian University. So we have two guests today that I'm really excited to introduce. I consider them both colleagues and friends in the research and innovation space. And welcome to Mike and Steve as our alumni speakers for today's webinar. Both Mike and Steve are Laurentian graduates who have gone on to make meaningful contributions in their fields and through their podcast, The Unlikely Innovators. Both are two-time Laurentian graduates with degrees, bachelor degrees and masters in arts and history. And it is my understanding that they actually met while undergraduates here at the university. So first off is Steve Gravel, who is the manager for the Center for Smart Mining. It's a federally funded center focusing on new technology in the mining sector, and that's at Cambrian College. He's a former business development and commercialization manager at the Ontario Centers of Innovation, which was formerly OCE. And he's also an experienced researcher in Northern Ontario's mining supply and services sector. And as you know, based on that knowledge, he writes a monthly technology column for the Canadian Mining Journal. Steve and I met when he started his role initially at Cambrian College, I believe in 2012. And in 2016, that's when I met Mike Commito when he assumed his role at the college. He is now the Director of Research and Innovation. And in 2021, he co-founded the Unlikely Innovators podcast with Steve. He is also the author of the Hockey 365 series. I believe he's published 3 or 4. He can tell. Five. Sorry, I should know that. In the series. So just to give a quick overview of the Unlikely Innovators, I'm sure everybody that's listening in has seen and watched the podcast or heard it on Spotify. I don't want to give too much away, but it started during the pandemic. Started a little bit, narrow about talking about what college research is, how funding works. But once they started having guests, it really accelerated. And they've had some really outstanding local innovators on the show, including more than a few Laurentian alumni, but also some well-known Canadian entrepreneurs, business leaders, and even a former astronaut termed business mentor. So today they are here to talk about their Laurentian experiences, their career journeys, and insights and provide insights for current students and alumni. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike and Steve, and I look forward to hearing about how two Laurentian grads ended up becoming podcast hosts and what the journey's been like along the way. So over to you.
Thanks, Giselle.
Thank you so much, Giselle. Obviously,
big place in my heart for you in the innovation ecosystem. We've been buddies for a while, so really thank you for those kind words. I really thought we were going to get through a live presentation without talking about Mike Commito's books, but no such luck this time. I really do well when I can hear the laughter from the crowd, so I'm just going to assume people are laughing. So I think we're going to go to the next slide, if I'm not mistaken. Yes.
Look
So
at that guy.
I know that's pretty nuts, right? So that's back when I had a jawline before I discovered cheese. But
I'll laugh.
yeah,
at you
thanks,
today.
Mike. I'm so glad we're in the same spot for this. But so, and I believe one of the well, he's in both pictures. Vance Coulis is probably on the line by now too. He's also a Laurentian alumni. But I bring up these two images to talk about two things. Two things. First is just my experiences and how I ended up at Laurentian and what I ended up doing there. So I actually initially started in first year at a different university. I was recruited to play football at Western University.
Ooh.
And when that dream fizzled when I got cut, I started, my life was kind of turned a bit upside down. I didn't really know what I was going to do with my academic career because I was so focused on athletics. So I returned home kind of with my tail tucked between my legs, and I applied to Laurentian to transfer there for second year. And that's kind of what I did. And I did have some friends already attending Laurentian. Vance Coulis, who's in that image on the left, he was taking labor and trade union studies. And that's actually an image of us in the pub down under when we crashed a frosh event. So we were both in second year, but we attended this event, and it was actually an all-day event that involved us doing it's for out of town frosh.
All day pub events sound.
Yeah, well, we look pretty good though.
Yeah. You're keeping it together.
We're not rough around the edges yet in this picture, but we had gone all across the city on a scavenger hunt, and there were out of towners there. And of course, as Sudbury born and raised, we had a bit of an advantage, and I ended up actually winning free pizza for a year from Topper's Pizza, which made me a popular person. So the transition to Laurentian was actually made easier by my ability to bring pizza to gatherings wherever I went that year. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I had been sort of registered at Western in social sciences, undeclared major. But when I got to Laurentian, I really decided, history is something I was really interested in high school. By then I had developed somewhat of a charismatic ability to speak. And my writing was pretty decent. So I figured that would be a good place for me to start. One other thing I wanted to mention about my experiences early on there was Vance actually convinced me to go to Model Parliament, which is a very unique Laurentian experience, I should say. And it allows you to go to Parliament Hill basically to pretend to be a member of Parliament for the event. And one thing I should say is Model Parliament really has a close place in my heart as well, because I sort of started and I was super nervous, and those that knew me then could really attest to this. I had to do a 2-minute member statement, which is like a flash in the pan, when you think about it, but I agonized over what I was going to say. And really the beauty of Model Parliament, not only the camaraderie and then making networks that you'd have for the rest of your life, but public speaking in such a formal place like that, it really gets you to learn how to speak publicly and then to really crush down those nerves. So I really do credit Model Parliament with helping with that. Also, people who've been at Model Parliament could say that you really do learn negotiation skills for the first time, because the whole point is to get your budget passed by the end of the time you're there. So you're making a lot of really interesting trade deals and giving up different things in your budget to be able to get it passed. So I can't say enough about those experiences. So my experiences at Laurentian really, and we'll get into this in a few slides after this, really were important in, even if I didn't know it, in shaping where I was going to go as a student and then eventually as a professional.
So I think we'll move on to the next slide. which is undoubtedly an embarrassing photo of me. I'm willing to be vulnerable today, but actually, believe it or not, this is actually a photo of me thriving
Yeah.
in undergraduate at Laurentian. So obviously, I think well, I should probably explain this because it's probably not clear what's going on here. But this was one night after probably several hours spent at the pub down under, and it seemed like a good idea at the time for me to switch clothes with my girlfriend's best friend. And so we that's her tank top. That's not my tank top. I mean, I think I pulled it off semi okay, but no, she's putting on my sweatshirt. I'm wearing her tank top. But I say that this is a picture of me thriving at Laurentian because I came into Laurentian not knowing what I wanted to do. I think when I was leaving high school, I had always loved history, much like Steve. But I think I was kind of steered in a direction that I wouldn't necessarily be able to have a meaningful career with a history degree. And so I enrolled in political science in year one. And it was a struggle, I'll be honest. I was not interested in the program or any of the classes. Again, the faculty were great. And I just think I was just not prepared to start, dedicating my life to political science. It was not something I was passionate about. And there was a time at Laurentian, and if my parents are on the call, they can attest to this, where I thought my better path forward was to drop out entirely. And I had a bit of a moment in third year in which I thought, this is not working. I'm not, being successful in my classes. I'm wasting money by, going to school if I'm not going to commit. So maybe I'd be better off dropping out and going to find a job, doing work, doing furnace rebuilds. I used to do the summer shutdowns for a company that was at the time known as Auburn and then Anmar. I worked for them as well. And I thought, hey, those were fun. I enjoyed doing that type of work. Ultimately, doing it for a summer is probably different from an entire career. So fortunately for me anyway, I decided after a night of probably trying to find myself, maybe at the end of a brown bottle, decided I would go back and recommit. And I'll share a story a little bit later about how Laurentian, I think, ultimately, and some of the faculty at Laurentian had helped me really kind of reevaluate what I was doing and recommit to my studies, which ultimately kind of paved the way to where I am now professionally. And so I owe a lot to Laurentian for everything that it's done. And I think, just to kind of tie it back to the hockey analogy, because I know that Steve loves when I talk about hockey and hockey books, is that my transcript at Laurentian probably looks much like a hockey stick, because the first 2-3 years, not sure what it was that I was doing, but ultimately we get a nice blade curve a little bit after, thanks to the intervention of, one of our faculty members that Steve and I both had, Mark Kuhlberg, who I think gave us some very important advice that we'll talk about a little bit later from some of the insights that we gleaned from Laurentian that I think ultimately salvaged my academic career and put me on the right path. It was not the last time that I'd swapped clothes with my girlfriend's friends, but certainly Steve's like, I'm trying here.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's enough on that. I think that kind of sets the stage to where we were, but ultimately I think we want to talk a little bit now about how what history taught us and what we learned from those experiences at Laurentian.
Yeah, and you could obviously see that was way before skinny jeans, right?
I think it was the Randy River special, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, when people think about history, they often think about the subject matter. So, history's full of stories and lessons and facts and data, and that's what people sort of get hung up on. I think what we want to talk about is what is the practice of studying history? What did that teach us fundamentally in skills? Although the history facts are good at dinner parties,
yes,
when you're trying to impress your parents' friends, but not anyone our age or younger.
Dinner parties were you getting invited to?
Well, no, exactly. I'm not. I'm a bit of a loser, but but anyway, I think the things that we wanted to talk about that we really gleaned from history, and that is because it is a writing intensive exploit, and I think. When you have, a full deck of courses, you could be writing, 3 or 4 or 5 papers a week sometimes. Even as you progress through undergrad, you have to learn to really digest information and write concisely. And I think that's something, Mike, I don't know if you want to also reflect on that. That's something that they really, at Laurentian in the history program, is something that was instilled in us early on, is that it's a writing trade.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, I think this is ultimately going to be like a a Mark Kohlberg show, because I think of some of the assignments we had to do where
Yeah.
the assignment was like, it had to be 2 pages maximum, which turned out to be an even more difficult exercise than writing 10 pages. There was times when I think we both would have preferred to have the extra pages to write, but I think the purpose of that exercise was to show you how to write concisely, how to organize your thoughts, how with limited space you could still make a very compelling argument. And I think that was kind of drilled into us early on, and that was a defining assignment that we had throughout our years at Laurentian. And even as somebody who, and you went to a different university as well, and as I went to other universities, like nobody else really did that assignment the way that Mark did, and the way other professors in the history department at Laurentian did. And that honestly still is one of the reasons why I think we're able to write the way that we can today, because of all of that training, right?
Because remind us what happens if it was on to 3 pages.
It was a 0.
Yeah, it wasn't
automatic 0.
It wasn't part marks. It was
no,
0.
It was a 0.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd flown pretty close to the sun, but
yeah.
I'd never
check those margins.
Yeah, there was a lot of margin play.
Yeah.
Maybe some font doctoring, but no, it was a very serious penalty for going over. But ultimately, that was all like, again, I think I was probably pretty raw coming into that program, and still learning every day, as we write, how to become a more, effective writer in it. But I mean, I think the other piece, in addition to the writing, and then is the critical thinking, because ultimately, that's the biggest thing that I take away from taking a history program is how to organize your thoughts, how to make, compelling argument, whether you're at model parliament or you're in a 4th-year seminar class. Like, how do you take this information and put forward, compelling case? Or when you're reading a book, how do you describe and put together a coherent thought about why this book or the study wasn't particularly very good, other than I just didn't like it? That's not a good argument. Why didn't you like it? What are some of the reasons? How does this fit into the broader literature? And that, I think, is one of the most transferable things that we took from that is the critical thinking piece, analytical reasoning. Again, we were training ourselves for that in the 4, 5, 6 years. I mean, if you add up all the time that we spent in history at Laurentian, it's more than just an undergrad and more than a master's. But that critical thinking has served us in pretty much everything that we do. And ultimately, the writing, I think, is a big piece. But Steve, in terms of critical thinking, what would you want to add, or do you want to talk?
Well, yeah, I think people think about history as just a telling of facts. And I think what it showed us is, if you have a few different works that are dealing with the same event or the same time period, you can realize that there could be different tellings of the same event, or there could be different evidence that comes to bear. And how do you weigh that evidence, and how do you decide what reality is? And those kinds of skills that you never thought you were training at the time, to be able to look critically at evidence and being able to make a judgment call on it, I think is something that really hits home for me. And then obviously that really plays into communication, because it's not just about assessing it in your mind and having your thoughts organized. It's then communicating it both on the page. Well, no one uses paper anymore, but
we do.
Yeah, we got paper right here. Son of a logger, so this is really good. But then also how to communicate that verbally. And I think one thing that it taught me is obviously being confident enough and then being able to get that data and the backup to be able to make an evidence-based argument is something that I learned too. It's not just my opinion, it's opinion that is, situated within the literature, and then obviously backed up by facts.
Yeah. And I think there's some concrete examples we have of that with our early career paths. So maybe if we want to go to the next slide,
sure,
to talk about, I think, how we were able to take.
This is honestly, I forgot that we put these pictures in, but this is like a story of my haircuts. I feel this entire thing so far. I didn't realize we were doing that, so I'll have to just edit myself a little bit. So as you can see on the left, not a great lid, but I then went with a hard side part on the right. But I mentioned this, but so my parents owned a logging company when I was growing up, and that sort of influenced sort of the topics that really resonated with me as I went through the master's program. I ended up doing a thesis that involved looking at some logging activities in Algonquin Park in Ontario. And I think that was really interesting. When you become an expert or try to become an expert through focused graduate work, it really informs where your mind goes and what you start looking at for career prospects. So when I left as a graduate, one of the first jobs I had was actually not far at all. It was back on the third floor of the arts building in an organization at the time that was called INORD, the Institute for Northern Ontario Research and Development. And essentially that was an economics think tank, if you will, that was led by Dave Robinson, that was looking at different economic and social topics going on in Northern Ontario. So we looked at community-based forestry, which was something that was near and dear to me. We also looked at, importantly, identifying, characterizing, and describing the mining supply and service sector in Sudbury. And that, at the time, I didn't know this, but that's what really got the sort of the seed planted for me on mining technology. I started studying these mining technology companies in Sudbury and in Ontario, and that's what started to get me interested in looking into, where are these companies coming from? Do they export? Are they, like, what kind of technologies are they interested in? So that's really what started to get the ball rolling for me in my career. Fast forward a little while longer, I joined at the time Ontario Centre for Excellence, which became Ontario Centre for Innovation. I'll just ruminate on something, my hiring process there. I did know some of the folks that were hiring me, but a daunting thing that happened was at the final stage of that job as a business development manager that I was going for was a meeting with their VP at the time, a guy by the name of Bob Sivak. And he started the meeting essentially saying, well, I don't know why you're applying for this job. We've never hired arts grads before. What do arts grads bring to this job? And I had to have a really good answer. And the answer was very much what Mike and I talked about in the slides previous to this. I basically said, well, you'll never have someone that is able to communicate as effectively to our clients as me. I was, trying to big myself up a bit. And I guess by the end of it, I had convinced him because I did get the job and was successful. And I think Giselle can attest to this. I was one of their best business development managers for the time I was there. So arts grads can work in tech. They do have a role in a lot of different industries. And at that job is where I really started to learn a lot about tech investing, because we had a co-investment program at the time, as well as just the tech ecosystem and how that relates to college and university research. And that's, I think, what really primed me to the job I have now. When the center was founded in 2019, I guess I was the inaugural founder of that, or manager of that center, because that's what I do now. And then we work with mining company and mining technology companies and tech firms all the time. That's how arts grads end up doing the stuff we do, is through those sort of collisions you've had along the way, and just being really good communicators and proving your value through those jobs. So I think Mike has had an interesting career wind as well, and I think he'll tell us a bit about that now.
Yeah, so I think when I started, again, I already talked to you about starting at Laurentian and, almost dropping out of Laurentian, but by third year, I had rediscovered my passion for history and found that, that was where I should pour my efforts academically. And ultimately that ended up with me doing a master's at Laurentian. I think at the time in third year, I think my parents probably just would have been happy that I got my degree in 5 years, but ultimately that led to a 2-year master's. And then that led to doing a PhD at McMaster. So the picture on the left with the bear coat and the bear stuffy and the bear shirt was a result of the day that I successfully defended my my thesis. So that might have been the convocation night. Actually, that was a convocation.
Is that your dad?
It's my dad in the mirror. Yeah.
Cameo.
Yeah. So my dissertation was about the history of black bear hunting and management in Ontario, hence why I'm clad head to toe in bear stuff. There was a time when everybody in my life bought me bear things because they knew me as the bear guy. The one thing that was not allowed in my house, my girlfriend, future wife, Chantel, said no to a bear-themed toilet seat. And so that was the last straw. No more bear stuff after that. But ultimately, again, I never in my wildest dreams would have ever thought that I would go on to get a doctorate just because of where I started. But ultimately, being at Laurentian kind of opened my eyes to grad school possibilities, the possibility of pursuing a career in academia. Ultimately, I didn't go the traditional academic route after my PhD, but it's the reason why I am where I am and why I'm able to do what I do. But much like Steve, after I finished my degree, my PhD, I had my first job interview with a group called NPI, which is also a think tank, much like INORD, and they were also focused on issues related to Northern Ontario from Sudbury all the way up to Thunder Bay. And I had an initial interview that I thought went really well. And then I was invited to a lunch with the CEO of the organization at the time. And my dad's like, well, if you're getting a lunch interview, like, or a lunch meeting, then that's pretty much like in the bag. They're going to probably offer you the job at the end of the lunch. So the end of the lunch comes around and he says to me, he's like, why should I hire a history grad? He's like, normally at think tanks, especially political think tanks, like we hire economists and we hire political scientists. And I proceeded to give him probably a very similar answer that Steve gave to his prospective hiring manager, was that I have an extensive research background. I have, critical thinking skills. I have great communication skills. I think if you were to take a chance on me, I could still provide value to the organization by doing the research in areas that I could do, that type of qualitative research in. Again, I wouldn't be able to do the type of quantitative work that an economist could do, but we already had an economist on staff. So I would be adding value to the organization. Left a lunch and I didn't get a call back for like a good 3-4 days. So at that point, I'm like, I blew this. I did not get the job. Obviously, my answer wasn't good. They eventually did call me back. I did get the job. And ultimately, again, I think because of the experiences at Laurentian and gaining the skills that we did, that's how I was able to convince them that I should have that position. And ultimately, I did that for a year and a half. And then when Steve went to OCE, I took his position at Cambrian, and I began as a business developer there in 2016. And then a bit of a sliding doors moment. And then Steve came back in 2019. So again, all goes back to history at Laurentian.
History at Laurentian, that's right. So if we'll just head to the next slide. So that's where we reconnected, really. So Mike and I first met sort of in fourth year in the seminar classes that we were taking before grad school. And I think what we want to talk about here is just, I see a comment from the, that's really funny. I mean, we're seeing these are distracting us, these comments, but I do want to read them after. So interestingly, so we got introduced to each other after that. Now we work sort of hand in glove here at Cambrian R&D, which Mike leads, and then the Center for Smart Mining, which I manage. And the important thing to take away from here is, as two history grads from Laurentian, this mining innovation landscape that we find ourselves in R&D and mining has taken us around the world. So if you see on the left, that image sort of is Mike and I at the Las Vegas Mining Show, which is the largest mining show in the world. That's in a very large bucket. We got a chance to tell the good story about what's going on in Sudbury, what's going on at Cambrian College to the world. So we were there to recruit new partners, and tell people about what's going on in Sudbury and how proud we are to be from here and to develop partnerships there. And then that's an interesting one on the right, eh?
Yeah, we got to go to Finland actually this past summer. We had done a project with one of our longstanding partners, Sandvik, and they have facilities in Finland, and it's part of the culmination of this project, which is a model they've done with other universities and colleges in Europe. But we were the first Canadian post-secondary institution, college or university, to be able to go to Finland, go to one of their factories and actually demonstrate the project that the three students in that photo. So we got Eric, McKenna, and Felicity going left to right. And it was just a great opportunity. Again, Steve and I had to put on our chaperone hats for that trip because, a couple of our students had never left the country before. So again, had the chance to see the world as part of the job, but also, give these types of experiences to our students at Cambrian, who, again, they got to work on these projects. They got paid to do the work, but ultimately you can't put a price on being able to show them the world before they even graduate. So now when all three of them graduate this coming April, you'll be able to have shown, whoever they work for at that point, or if they go into more schooling, that, what Cambrian R&D was able to do for them and how they were able to get an experience like going to Finland, walking around in the rain, even though they didn't want to, but we made them because
It was
we're in Finland. Yeah. We're going for a walk. I don't care if it's raining. You should have packed shoes other than Crocs. Yeah, we're going for a walk.
Your dad voice came out a few times.
Yeah, it was good. I felt like I was meant to do that at that moment.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so I think our careers we found a lot of value and meaning in them, and I think going back and thinking, could two history grads have found a place in high-tech sector like mining and innovation ecosystems. I think ultimately, you surround yourself with those technical people, but it's the ability to communicate, to create, to think. That's how you find that place, because you need to be able to communicate with everybody from the funders to the people at the companies on the shop floors, to the people in the executive suites, to our, executives here at Cambrian. You need to have that communication and that critical thinking piece, regardless of what your discipline is.
Yeah. So, I mean, at bottom, I think the careers we have had so far, and they're not by any means over.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
At least for another.
Well, we have gleaned a few things from our time at Laurentian that I think we wanted to share with you all. First, and there's going to be some Mark Kuhlberg marbled throughout this. You need to put in the effort. I remember he took me aside, I believe it was at the end of third year. I think I had bombed a paper pretty solidly due to lack of effort, which was not uncommon. But Mark had a very distinct way of meeting you where you are and speaking in the language that resonates with you. And I remember distinctly a moment where he said, you got to put on the cleats, you got to do the hard work, you got to put the effort in. And I think that was sort of a change moment for me. Having played football for most of my life at that point, it's like, sometimes you got to really reach down inside and actually put the effort in. And then if you have raw talent that's been identified, the only thing left that you need is that effort. And I think that was something that was really meaningful for me.
And actually, Mark did the same thing to me at some point. Probably, I forget what years we would have been in undergrad, different times, but
yeah,
same idea. Third year, this was right around the time when I was having a crisis in terms of what my future would look like. And for whatever reason, he pulled me aside after class one day and he's like, you could be giving more. Whether it was participating, whatever he saw, I did not see in myself at that time. So I don't know what he had identified, but I had not yet identified that in me. But him, I think, taking me aside was enough of okay, this is a bit of a wake-up call. And then that is kind of the moment right around when I realized, regardless of where I was going to take this history degree, this is clearly somebody who has, taken the time and care to come and reach out to me. And that was honestly the TSN turning point in my entire, career at Laurentian, was that moment saying, you need to do more. You need to put the cleats on. You need to put your stick on the ice.
Any more sports metaphors, I think.
Yeah, I think we're good. But, and then another thing that Mark did tell me, and he probably said this to you as well, is, market yourself as broadly as you can. And whenever anybody asks me, what advice do I have to, current students at Laurentian or alumni from Laurentian, it's that market yourself as broadly as you can, because I think, Mark and some of our other professors realized that we weren't all going to go off and have, careers in academia with history degrees, but they knew that the skills that we had, like the critical thinking, the writing, the communication, those were all transferable. And it was just a matter of thinking outside the box and showcasing the skills that you had could be valuable to any employer in pretty much any role, unless you're, of course, maybe operating like a nuclear reactor or something like that. But I still think we could do it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that paid off when we got the jobs that we did at the time, because ultimately we were able to market ourselves broadly, because those two think tanks wouldn't have thought of us for those roles. But because he had always kind of hammered into our heads that you need to think beyond just history. What are the skills that you have? How can those skills be valuable? And I think we've never really forgotten that message.
Yeah, and I think just to wrap up this slide, I think what we've demonstrated so far, just in our life, for folks that might be in the arts programs, is arts grads have more pathways than you think. I think you just need to market yourself as broadly as possible, put in the work, and take a chance on those job opportunities.
Mm-hmm. And then
look how young you look. I didn't see it on the big screen. Not to say you look old, you look great.
Oh, thank you.
But I think we just wanted to pause briefly on this slide, because it is also about the friends you make along the way. And I'm sure a lot of alumni speakers talk about this, but your network that you gain in university is invaluable for the rest of your life. So do take those relationships seriously. And I think technology makes it a lot easier to stay in touch as time goes on, but do take that seriously and maintain those relationships, because you really never know where people are going to end up. This photograph was actually taken on my 25th birthday.
Is that what that was?
Yeah.
Sioux, Michigan?
Sioux, Michigan, when we went to a casino there. So,
yeah, this was probably still back when they had You could smoke.
You
in
could smoke
bars.
indoors. That's how old we are.
Yeah,
That's
how
so
old we are,
embarrassing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Dollar shots.
Yeah,
Hey, we
yeah.
don't have to get into all this.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
still a few more slides that I think are a little bit more.
Yeah, we need to get to the podcast. My
Yeah.
God.
So so I think you wanted Steve coined the
Yeah.
with the title, so I'll let him kind of take.
Thank you for that credit. So we were Mike and I are avid podcast listeners. One of the things, as we're trying to navigate through the pandemic at the time, we had just gone into lockdown, and we were sort of thinking like, there's not too many college-based podcasts that are dealing with the subject matter that we talk about all the time. So how do we start a podcast? And what we thought about was, we're unlikely innovators in our own right, given our backgrounds. Northern Ontario is an unlikely destination for what you'd call innovative things.
Mm-hmm.
Colleges are unlikely places for innovation. A lot of people don't know we're doing R&D here. So why don't we call it the Unlikely Innovators and focus on people that have had unlikely pathways to where they ended up when we talked to them. So that's where it started, and it was deliberately focused sort of on Northern Ontario, but also the college community. But as we started to get more and more guests on the pod, it became evident that it was getting bigger and more broad than that.
Yeah, I think in the college space, it just didn't. There was nothing really like that, right? And I mean, I think one thing that we will share that is a bit of a humble brag. Well, it's not really humble brag; it's more instructive than anything. That Steve and I had met a colleague of ours, and her name is Chelsea, but I can't remember which institution she's from. And I think we ran into her at a conference, and she recognized us from the podcast.
Job done.
Job done.
Yeah.
And she said that she just got a job in college applied research at her respective institution. And she said that the reason she believes she got the job from her interview is because she listened to the podcast. And it was because the first 5 episodes we did was all about college applied research. Like, what is college applied research? How is it valuable? How do you get funding for it? What is the Technology Access Center, which is, the center that Steve, manages and oversees? All of these things for her were instructive enough that she got a job. So if nothing else, I'd say like, job done.
Yeah, we helped. We helped.
Did a great job.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we've been going 5 years strong now. We're going to head into our 6th season very soon. We've done 139 episodes and have had a chance to interview, a lot of interesting, innovative people from Sudbury and beyond around the world. I think if we go to the next slide, we also had the opportunity to highlight a lot of great and innovative voyageurs in our community who are doing important work, who again, I think would also credit their time at Laurentian to getting them where they are now.
Yeah, and I think it's just important that, voyageurs are doing great things. Laurentian grads are doing really great things. I mean, on this slide, we have, Mario Grassi from Technica Mining. We have Randy Ray, who's built some really incredible community-based organizations that are doing excellent work. And then Julie Zulich from Tesk. And this is cool because this is when we were doing on location podcasts, like Randy opened her home to us.
Yeah.
It was, just such a comfortable and then heartwarming thing. And then of course,
we went to Mario's back office, which is nicer than my house.
Yeah, I was going to say that's right off of Mario's office.
Yeah.
It's just a bar that's better stocked than most restaurants in town, but I digress. But I mean, it's just the point is that we're able to highlight some journeys in each of these people that were not exactly obvious at the time, and hopefully be instructive to listeners, that it doesn't matter where you start. It really does depend on where you end up and how you finish. So I think on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about some other guests that we've had on, because it did get out of control at some point with the celebrities that we had on. So like you could see in my face, I don't smile all that often. My wife says I have like what's called a resting bitch face, but you could see that I'm fanboying out here because we had Peter Mansbridge on the podcast.
Yeah, so obviously a legend in Canadian journalism, an unlikely innovator in his own right, because his career started because he was an airport baggage handler in Manitoba, and somebody had heard him over the intercom, I guess one day, and thought that you've got a voice for radio, and certainly did, and also a face for television. But we reached out to Peter Mansbridge just thinking, hey, we might as well have him on the podcast. He had retired formally from broadcasting, but he had his own podcast, the what is it?
The bridge.
The bridge. I was going to call it the Man's Bridge, but that's his name. It was called the bridge. It's still called the bridge. But anyway, we shot our shot, thought we'd reach out to Peter Mansbridge. I think this was after we'd interviewed Chris Hadfield. So
yeah,
we were really feeling ourselves at this point that we might as well just keep
we were in
the fences.
Yeah.
But I think that the moment here that was pretty hilarious for us was that after Mansbridge had agreed to be on our podcast, I wrote him another email saying, like, would you like us to send you some questions in advance? And he wrote back, I don't need questions. And I said to Steve, it's like, why would we have asked Peter Mansbridge?
He's interviewed
if he needs
leaders of the world.
So
yeah,
that was a bit of a humbling, eye-opening moment that maybe as much as Steve and I were kind of getting a nice little, you know, rhythm going in the podcast, that like we were still going to get schooled by this legend in the field. And so he was great. Had a lot of fun talking to him. I think, unfortunately, we had talked about, you know, the Leafs winning the cup that year. That was back in 2022. Yeah. They have obviously since not won the cup since then. They're still this year. But, you know, a lot of fun interviewing Mansbridge, Colonel Hatfield.
Yeah, we had, you know, a couple astronauts on. We also had a hero of ours, Dale Dye from the Band of Brothers series. So I think it's been a really, really interesting time being able to see some of these high profile people. And I think, you know, when it's whether it's Peter Mansbridge or others, I like it when they say, I've never been asked that question before. That's when, you know, we're really flexing those history muscles on the research that we're doing ahead of time. So maybe just to wrap up on the next slide, some of the insights that we have, some advice and parting thoughts for you, and then we're going to end with a bit of an advocacy slide. I think it's really important to understand, you know, if we were just thinking about our training and our careers, you know, myopically and not trying anything new, you know, we'd be in different positions. Being, you know, having the courage to say yes to something new, I think is really important. And as I mentioned before, really don't underestimate the power of your network. Some of the people I know in university that have gone on to work in the mining industry, you know, I still call up now to work on projects and to you know, do the sniff test on some of the crazy ideas I might have. But it's just really important, those two things, I think, and again, keeping those front of mind as you're going through it.
And I think ultimately, like, just keeping in mind that you can do anything with your degree from Laurentian. So, I mean, I think the most important thing is buckling down and getting that degree, getting that page, but knowing that it doesn't define you. Again, your transcript doesn't define you. I think as long as you're open to marketing yourself broadly, and the things that you've learned from Laurentian are invaluable for you finding a rewarding career in any field. Again, I think, like I said, a lot of people would have told us with history degrees, neither of you will work in the careers that you have. But ultimately, we were, you know, willing to do the work and also willing to kind of think outside the box. I think that is another piece of advice and a lesson that we kind of want to leave you with. And I mean, the last thing I'd say is go to the library.
Best place.
Steve and I, we walked through the stacks when we were kind of getting ready for this video, and it brought back so many memories. I think by the time we had, you know, I buckled down, was that like every night it was like you were in the librry getting assignments done, studying, and then the next morning you were back in the library until you had to go to class. And I think ultimately, you know, as two people who love books and love reading, I think it makes a lot of sense. But ultimately, I think it's just an advocacy call for buckling down, doing the work. It doesn't have to be a library. It could be wherever you want to go to do your work, but just go somewhere.
But also, it is the library.
Yeah, but go somewhere. You should go to the library.
Yeah, I think we just have something fun we want to leave you with on the next slide here. Bring back the pub.
You weren't going to say it, but you did.
Well, but I mean, like, it's not on the slide. I think one of the things that I think history was very unique as a department is we'd have a lot of our fourth year and even third year classes, especially if they're towards the end of the week, in the pub as a means of coming together, enjoying a drink, but also, you know, sort of really exercising the traditional academic, you know, conversation-based learning. And I think that's something that's really important. I mean, Mike and I have been at institutions across Canada, and I think it's such an important part. And I understand, you know, demographics change and folks' interests change, but I just really think the pub down under was so legendary as a place. You'd hear people that never even attended Laurentian talk about it. And I think it's important to realize that that's a really important part of campus culture. So if you ever need a volunteer to advocate on this on behalf of the SGA, because I think it was run by the SGA at the time, I'd love to volunteer as much of my time and energy as possible. If, of course, there's interest among the student body to have this return. It could be a coffee house during the day and a pub at night, but I just think it's such an important part of campus culture and collegiality on building those networks, that it's more than just, the cheap pictures.
No, it was truly the place to be. Wednesday nights, which was an odd night, but like Wednesday nights, Saturday nights, if you were not there before 8 o'clock, you were probably not getting it. But anyway, beyond, I think just like the personal connections we made at the pub. Yeah, just I have a big the pub down under will always have a piece of my heart, and so
And why is that?
I mean, I connected with my future wife for the first time at the pub.
There you go.
On the dance floor on St. Patrick's Day of all nights with the green beer. But anyway, that's too much information. And we're probably over our time limit, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just to say, we really thank everyone who joined. Laurentian was a huge part of our lives, huge part of our careers. We really thank Shanley and the Alumni Association and the Alumni Department for inviting us. And hopefully you were able to glean something from that rambling mess that we just went through. But thank you all for joining. And I guess we'll go to some questions now. Back to you, Shanley.
Thank you so much, Mike and Steve, for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. I really miss the pub food, so I hear that slide. We'll begin now with the Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to submit it through the Q&A feature or the chat. I'll be helping to moderate, and I'll read the questions out loud. And we'll go through as many questions as the time allows. And I see we had a couple Q&As come in from Vance. So I'll go ahead and ask this question. Vance has asked, where do you guys get your ideas from? I'm assuming this is for the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a little bit of an inside joke too, coming from a Norm Macdonald podcast. But what I will say is, the ideas, especially for the podcast, I know that he wasn't expecting me to have an answer for this question, but one of the things that was sort of a good weather vane for us is the human that we'd be interviewing. So what is their story? So looking for folks that have stories that are emblematic of the theme of the podcast, which is the unlikely innovators, people that are ending up doing things that aren't exactly obvious from the training or road that they had been on previous. So I think that's been pretty clear throughout. And I think as we do things, as the podcast continues, I think that'll still be a core principle of it. So that's where we get our ideas from. But thank you for the question.
A question popped up in the webinar chat. Someone had asked, I heard that mining companies in Canada limit the undergraduate majors of job applicants. I don't know within the roles that you have currently, if that's a question you can answer, provide any insight on.
Sorry, I missed the middle of that question. Can you say that again?
Yeah, I heard that mining companies in Canada limit the undergraduate majors of job applicants.
I don't really understand the meaning of the question. I
think if you don't have a traditional mining.
Oh, I see. Well, actually, I'm starting to see that that's less and less the case. So for sure, if you're applying for a mining engineering job, they're going to expect that you have a mining engineering degree. But I think that from an engineering perspective, the mining companies that we talk to, especially with the advent of more and more technology in the mining space, they're being much more interested in different disciplines. So chemical engineers, process engineers, electrical engineers, software engineers, those are all becoming really important. And I think if it's not the mines themselves, I think you have a lot more success too, right? So if mines are being limiting to what kinds of roles they're hiring for, there's a very healthy mining supply and service sector in Canada that I think you should also look at, because that's when you don't see the obvious career paths. We hired someone here who's an automotive engineer by training, but they work on mining equipment design all day long. So if you could come at it again, and it's instructive what Mike and Mark were talking about, market yourself as broadly as possible. If your degree doesn't say mining engineering, convince them why it still matters that your experiences throughout your educational experiences make you a valuable team member. So I haven't seen as restrictive screening as if you don't have the mining engineering degree, but if it's a mining engineering program that's like frontline, you're going to expect it to be a mining engineer.
So this question is for Mike, also from Vance. Mike, how do you pick what team to write about? What one is next?
Well, that's a good question.
It isn't a good question because I don't want to talk about this anymore.
You had two answers.
Okay, go ahead.
The Leafs are my team, so I picked the Leafs first because it's my favorite team, and then I did the Canadians next because the publisher really wanted us to do another book, and they felt if we wanted to continue with the series, it should be another Canadian team, and the Montreal Canadiens being an original six team made the most sense. So I jumped into that one. It was a little bit apprehensive at first, but ultimately learned a lot, had a lot of fun writing that one. And then for the latest book, Bruins 365, the publisher actually wanted me to do a Wings 365. And I vetoed that, and I said, we need to do the Bruins one first. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of great Bruins connections here in Sudbury. The Beef and Bird, which again, if we want to talk about pubs, we don't have enough time, but I could do a whole slide on the Beef and Bird and Porchetta Bingo. I just felt I wanted to do the Bruins one next. And that's what I ended up doing. And ultimately that was, I think the most fun I had was writing the Bruins book, despite being a Leafs fan and being tormented by the Bruins for the last, several years. What is next? I don't have any plans yet for another team book. But certainly I think you can make a good argument for the Wings next or the Blackhawks or maybe another Canadian team like the Canucks or the Oilers. I have a hard time thinking about Rangers 365 because I don't believe I've met a real life New York Rangers fan. So that'll be a harder sell.
Fair point.
Yeah.
Thanks for your questions, Vance.
So another question has come in. From your experience, what most often distinguishes people who successfully transition into mining and applied innovation beyond technical ability?
That's an excellent question. That's an excellent question because we're facing 191,000 job shortages in the next 10 years in mining. So if you're doing the math, those people will largely not come from the mining sector themselves. It'll be from adjacent sectors. And I think, taking a first crack at this, I think it's a more nuanced question that could be unpacked further if I had more time. But I think, considering mining as a career opportunity, I think is the first thing. So being able to get over the historical bad things you've heard about mining is the first thing. So it's still dirty work and it's still hard work, but there's so many more opportunities in it now. So I think when you're leaving or transitioning from another industry, you have to consider what your experience has been thus far. If it's in oil and gas and say you're a software engineer, there's a lot of applicability in the mining sector for someone that may have been working in that. So my advice is essentially trying to see yourself and the experience you've accrued so far in the mining process. So learn what the mining process is, how it's different from the industry you've been in, and trying to find where you fit with your skills within that mining process, all the way from exploration through mine development, even if it's finance. If you've worked in finance somewhere else, find out what it takes to start up a new mine in finance. What do the raises look like? What does that picture look like, and where do you fit? Mining, it just isn't about technical fields at the face. It's also about all of the trades, technology, business disciplines that underpin it. So really try and find where your fit would be by really learning and reading about what the mining process is. Mike, do you have anything else to add?
I just think like mining has always been a very innovative industry. I think oftentimes it gets a unearned reputation that it's not innovative. I think it just takes longer for a lot of these innovations to be adopted because safety is and always should be the most paramount concern. But they've been adopting EVs, teleremote technology for decades now. And I think ultimately somebody who is curious, who is willing to learn, who has an innovative mindset can bring a lot to mining, because I think to Steve's point with the ongoing, skilled labor shortages, the pressing need for critical minerals now as part of, Canada's, plan for, securing our national security, our national economy. Mining needs more innovative people. They need people from diverse and varied backgrounds, different perspectives. And so I think ultimately, if you can see a space for yourself in mining, chances are there is an opportunity for you.
Thank you guys so much for that wonderful response. We'll go ahead and answer one more question looking at the time. I'm thinking someone has asked, or Lily has asked, advice for the younger generation who may be too nervous to put themselves out there and may fear failure.
Yeah. I had that problem for a while. Nervousness.
Putting yourself out there?
Yeah, I know.
You?
I know. It's nuts. I used to have even in the job I have now, I have sometimes because I don't have an engineering degree, I sometimes have imposter syndrome, vis-a-vis like what could I possibly recommend that an engineer hasn't thought of? But I mean, to Mike's point about diverse opinions, I think it's important to have diversity of opinions in that trade. Look, I think I don't want this to sound too boomerish, but like to be honest, like you have to get out there and experience things a little bit at a time. One thing that I will say locally in Sudbury that you can get involved in is the local CIM chapter puts on pretty regular mixers that are usually at Science North or somewhere else. So the Canadian Institute of Mining local Sudbury chapter does deliberately put out ice-breaking events for folks that are in the industry or that want to get into the industry, and they do have a couple student nights over the year. And you could tell that there's some pretty awkward, nervous people in the room that are just looking to go and chat, but it's a very safe space for people that just want to start rubbing shoulders with other folks in the industry. And I think that's how you start doing it, is by taking little bites of little networking events like that. Another one I should say is WISE for women in mining and engineering.
Yeah.
It's a good one locally where if they're holding deliberately safe events that allow people that it might be their first time ever going to a networking event, but it's really like putting yourself out there. Thank you, Giselle. Mind Connect also has its regional events.
Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce, like just getting involved. It's open to the public, a lot of these events. So just really taking those little steps, I think, makes you feel more comfortable. And guess what? You know, you might leave an event the first time making no contacts or having only a couple conversations, but the more you do it, the better it gets.
It is a tough thing because I think I still have trouble going up to strangers at events and introducing myself and trying to join a conversation that I was not originally part of. But it's definitely improved over the years. I think even going to conferences early on, like I think, naturally extroverted and gregarious, but I would always it was tough to go and meet new people. But I think as you just do more of it, it just becomes a little bit more organic. And then as you meet more people, you naturally then build your network. And when you go to these events, you'll recognize people that you've met at previous events or maybe through your work, and it makes it a little bit easier. But I think it's just a matter of jumping in with both feet. It's not going to be fun at first. Sometimes it's awkward, but ultimately I think it's important to do that, to build your network, to build your connections, because you never know when you cross paths with that person again, and they may be future colleague, future employer.
Well, and realize that the other people at those events might just be as nervous as you. So everyone wants someone to talk to.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to remember. Even people that are a tough hang like Mike can make friends with these.
Even someone as shy as Steve.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you both so much. This slide here is just a scan. You can scan this with your phones for a link to the Unlikely Innovators landing page, so you can tune into the podcast. This QR code here should take you directly to their landing page. There should also be a resource floating around as well, where you can actually click the link built into the webinar itself.
Yeah, and just sorry, Shanley, just really quickly on that point. This year, we were very fortunate to be with Eastlink, and I think you should check out what's going to be coming. They'll be on social media for us this year.
Soon enough.
Soon enough. Updates. Go ahead.
So thank you so much again to our alumni speakers, Steve and Mike, for taking the time to join us and sharing your experiences so openly, and some really great insight for current students, new grads, alumni who are considering, their own careers and just having the opportunity to learn from you and hear some of your experiences. And a sincere thank you as well to Giselle Roberts for introducing our speakers today, and to everyone who took the time to attend. I really hope that everyone found today's discussion really valuable, and to please keep an eye out for future alumni events and webinars. We'd love to have you join us again. At the end, there's going to be a quick survey. Please take the time to fill it out and let us know if you have any ideas for future session topics or any future speakers. It's also a good opportunity too to ask any additional questions in case we missed you in the Q&A. if you have any specific questions for Mike and Steve, I'll make sure that those questions get to them as well. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.